They didn't start by yelling. They didn't start with a fight. They started with silence. The kind of silence that feels louder than any scream. That morning, I picked up my phone to call my sister like I always do. The screen lit up, but there was no sound, no ring, no voice. Just dead air. At my age, silence doesn't mean peace. It means something is wrong. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. My hands were shaking, but not from age, from instinct, from the feeling you get right before bad news arrives. And then, an hour later, it happened. The cashier looked at me with that polite smile people use when they don't want to embarrass you. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card isn't going through." I was standing there with bread and tea in my hands, 78 years old, buying the same things I'd bought for decades. That's when something inside me shifted. Not loudly, quietly, like a door closing somewhere deep in my chest. By noon, my internet stopped working to .phone, car, .internet. 3 things gone in one day. That's not bad luck. That's planning. I went back home and sat in my living room, staring at the phone like it had betrayed me. I'd lived in that house for over 40 years, raised my son there, buried my husband from there, paid every bill with my own hands after long nights at the clinic. And suddenly, I felt like a guest in my own life. That afternoon, the front door opened without a knock. My son Brian walked in. Behind him, his wife Laura. They still had the keys I gave them years ago, back when I believed trust was permanent. Laura's heels clicked against my floor like she was entering a hotel, not the home of the woman who once stayed up all night taking care of her sick child. "Mom," Brian said, not kindly, not gently, the way someone talks to a stubborn dog. "We need to talk." I stayed seated. When you get older, you learn something important. Power doesn't always come from standing up. Sometimes it comes from refusing to move. "What happened to my phone?" I asked. Brian sighed. He always sighed like the world was personally disappointing him. "We shut it off. You don't really need all that technology anymore. It just confuses you." "It didn't confuse me yesterday," I said. "That's not the point," Laura cut in. She placed a folder on my table like I was a patient signing hospital papers. "We're simplifying your life. You've been struggling with bills, appointments, passwords. It's getting unsafe. Unsafe. That word people use when they want control, but don't want to admit it." "I haven't struggled," I said quietly. Brian ignored me. "Your card is paused too. We're consolidating your accounts. You'll get a small weekly allowance. We'll handle the rest." Allowance. Like I was a child who couldn't be trusted with lunch money. "And my internet?" I asked. Laura smiled the way people smile when they think they're being kind, but are really being cruel. "You're too easy to scam at your age. We're just protecting you, protecting me." From who? From everyone, except themselves. Brian leaned forward, like he expected gratitude. We're doing this for your own good, Mom. You should have let us take over sooner. You've been slipping. Another word people use when they want to tie your hands without leaving marks. I folded my hands in my lap so they wouldn't shake. Give me back my accounts. He shook his head. It's already done. They thought that was the end. They thought age meant surrender. But age doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. They left like nothing happened. Confident, certain I would fall in line. They left the folder behind. I opened it slowly, carefully, and that's when I saw it. My name, my signature, on papers I had never signed. And in that quiet moment, sitting alone in my own kitchen, I understood something that would change everything. They didn't just take my phone. They didn't just take my money. They tried to take my life, and they had no idea what I still had left to fight back. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep needs peace, and my mind had turned into a courtroom where every memory was being questioned. I left the folder on the kitchen table, right under the yellow light of the old lamp. My name was still there on those pages, written neatly, carefully, by a hand that thought I was too old to notice. The house was quiet, but not the comforting kind of quiet. This was the kind that listens back. Every sound felt louder. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, even my own breathing sounded like someone else was in the room with me. At my age, you learn to hear meaning in silence, and that night, silence sounded like a warning. By morning, I had read every page twice. Every single document carried that same false signature. My name, written by someone who assumed I would never challenge it. I pressed my finger against the ink. The curves were wrong. The pressure was wrong. Too rushed. Too careless. Brian had always been careless when he thought he'd already won. When the mail arrived, the sound of it hitting the box made me jump. That surprised me more than anything. I'd lived alone for years. Nothing usually startled me anymore. Inside the envelope was a notice from my insurance provider. Updated financial authorization. Something I had never requested. That's when I understood this wasn't just about a phone plan or a debit card. They were building a net around me, and they were doing it quietly. I made myself tea. Strong. No sugar. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I asked for help, not from family, from a stranger. I walked next door and asked my neighbor if I could use her phone. She didn't ask questions. She just handed it to me with that soft look people give when they sense something isn't right, but don't want to invade your pain. I dialed the bank slowly, carefully, like every number mattered. A young woman answered. Her voice was calm, professional, kind in a way that didn't feel fake. I told her my name, and then I told her the truth. I think someone changed my accounts without my permission. There was a pause, not rude, not cold, just serious. She pulled up my file. Then she said words that still echo in my ears. There have been several updates to your account. A new primary manager, spending limits, and a caretaker authorization filed on your behalf. Caretaker. That word hit harder than anything else. And who is listed as caretaker? I asked. There was another pause. Your son. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. She hesitated before speaking again. These changes were accompanied by your signature. I didn't sign anything, I said. This time, the silence on the line wasn't empty. It was respectful. Then she said, Ma'am, I think you need to come in today. Fraud. That's what she called it. Fraud is a big word for something built from small betrayals. A signature here, a phone line there, a card turned off under the excuse of care. I thanked my neighbor, put on my coat, and walked to the bus stop. I hadn't taken the bus in years, but independence is made of small decisions. And that morning, I needed that bus more than I needed comfort. At the bank, everything smelled clean, polished, controlled. A young manager named Ellen invited me into her office. She closed the door gently, like she was protecting me from something, or maybe protecting the truth. She placed the documents in front of me. Is this your signature? I looked at the page. No, I said. It isn't. That was all she needed to hear. She froze the changes immediately, canceled the restrictions, flagged the file for review. Then she said something that tightened my throat. Someone also attempted to initiate a guardianship request. Guardianship. A cage with legal hinges. It's what people use when they want to own you, without calling it ownership. Is it finalized? I asked. No, she said, but the intent was filed. Intent. That meant they were planning my future without me. Ellen slid new papers toward me. We can restore your access, issue a new card, secure your accounts. But I strongly recommend you speak to a lawyer. A lawyer. I never imagined needing one to protect myself from my own son. When I left the bank, the wind felt sharper, colder. But I felt awake for the first time in weeks. Halfway home, my phone buzzed. It hadn't buzzed all day. A message appeared on the screen. Service restored. Please contact administrator. Administrator. Not me. Not family. Administrator. Someone still believed they had control over my life. That's when I understood something important. They hadn't turned my services back on to help me. They turned them back on to remind me who they thought was in charge. When I reached my front steps, I felt strangely calm, not peaceful, prepared. Inside, I placed the bank folder next to the forged papers on my kitchen table. 2 versions of my life. The one they wanted for me, and the one I was about to fight for. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Not softly, not politely, sharp, demanding. I didn't even need to look through the peephole. Brian stood there, red in the face, anger sitting on his shoulders like armor. He walked in before I could invite him. "What did you do at the bank?" he snapped. I closed the door slowly. "I fixed your mistake." He laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. "Your mistake. You froze everything. You made this 10 times harder." "I made it honest," I said. He stepped toward the table, staring at the folder. "I was fixing your situation." "My situation," I repeated. "You mean my life. You're 78. He shot back. "You forget things. You almost fell for a scam." I hung up. I said, "That's not falling for it. You gave them your address." I gave them the street name, not the number. He threw up his hands. "You're proving my point." No, he was proving his excuse. I walked to the kettle and poured water into my cup. "Let the steam rise between us like a thin wall." "You forged my signature," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. Instead, he changed the story. "We talked to a lawyer. We were told it was the fastest way if you resisted help. The fastest way to steal my independence." I said. "It's just paperwork." "No," I replied. "It's my life on paper." He paced like a man trapped in his own lies. "You don't understand how hard things are for us. The bills, the mortgage, Cassidy's car. Ah, there it was. You were going to use my money," I said. He went quiet, not angry, caught. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to protect his lifestyle. I opened a drawer and pulled out old envelopes, receipts, college payments I had quietly covered years ago, emergency loans I never asked back for. I placed them next to the forged papers. "This," I said, "is 20 years of me helping you." Then I tapped the fake signature. "And this is how you repay me." For the first time since he walked in, he looked small, not young, small, like a man who built his confidence on the belief that I would never fight back. "This isn't over," he muttered. I nodded. "You're right. It's not." He left. The door slammed, and when the sound faded, I sat down at my table, smoothed the papers in front of me, and understood something with absolute clarity. They thought they had cornered me, but all they had done was give me proof. And proof is a powerful thing in the hands of a woman who has nothing left to lose. By late afternoon, the house felt too quiet, not peaceful, not heavy, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest and makes you aware of every breath you take. I moved slowly from room to room, touching the back of chairs, straightening curtains that didn't really need fixing. Not because the house was messy, because I was. Every corner of that home carried a piece of my life. The years I worked double shifts at the clinic. The nights I cried into my pillow after my husband passed. The mornings I woke up anyway, because the child still needed breakfast. And now my own son thought he could erase all of that with a few forged papers and disconnected services. I sat back down at the kitchen table and read through the bank folder again. Not because I didn't understand it, because I wanted to understand exactly how they planned to take everything from me without ever asking. That's when the doorbell rang. Not loud, not demanding, soft. I knew that rhythm. I opened the door and saw my granddaughter Lucy standing there, twisting her fingers together the way she always did when she was nervous. "Grandma," she said, "Dad's been calling everyone. He's furious." "What happened?" I stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart." She walked into the kitchen and stared at the papers spread across the table. "This looks serious." "It is," I said. "Your father tried to take control of my life." She shook her head at first. "Automatically. He wouldn't." Then she stopped herself, because deep down, she already knew the truth. "I'm handling it," I told her. She leaned forward. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Just honesty," I said. "Did they talk to you about putting me somewhere?" Her eyes dropped to her hands. That answer was louder than any words. "They mentioned assisted living," she admitted quietly. "Laura said it would stabilize things. Dad said you were slipping. That word again. The word people use when they're really trying to push you off a cliff without admitting they're the ones doing the pushing." Lucy's eyes filled. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. You hoped they wouldn't go this far," I said gently. She nodded. I took her hand in mine. Her palm was warm, steady. "I'm not fighting my whole family," I told her. "Only the ones who forgot what family means." She squeezed my fingers. "Tell me how I can help." And in that moment, I realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. I wasn't alone. I just wasn't surrounded by the right people anymore. Lucy stayed less than an hour, but her presence changed the air in the house. When she left, the silence felt different. Not like a threat, like space. I gathered the papers into two piles on the table. One pile was truth. The other was betrayal. The second pile was thicker. By early evening, I heard a car pull into the driveway. A soft engine, careful tires, not Brian. A woman in a pale blazer stood on my porch, clipboard in hand. I knew before she rang the bell. A care coordinator. Laura's next move. The doorbell chimed politely. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Mrs. Howard," she said with a practiced smile. "I'm Megan from Brookside Senior Support. Your family asked me to check in." "Did they?" I replied. She stepped slightly forward. "They mentioned you've been having difficulty managing finances and daily tasks. They're worried about your safety, my safety." Always the same words. "And you believe them?" I asked. She shifted her weight. "We take family concerns seriously." I held out my hand. "May I see the referral?" She hesitated. then handed me the clipboard. I read it carefully, forgetful, confused, unable to manage decisions. Boxes checked that didn't belong to me. Do I look confused to you? I asked. Megan glanced past me into the house. Clean counters, organized shelves, files neatly stacked. No, she admitted softly. You don't. Then listen carefully, I said. I am not answering personal questions today. She swallowed. My family wants control. I continued. Not care. Her posture changed. Less official, more human. May I ask something off the record? She said quietly. Yes. Do you feel safe from them? The question surprised me, not because I didn't have an answer, but because no one had asked the right one before. Yes, I said, but they may not feel safe from me anymore. She looked at me differently after that. I'll note that you declined assessment, she said, and that you appear fully capable. She tore a card from her folder and handed it to me. If they push for guardianship, this visit will matter. After she left, I locked the door. Not from fear, from intention. That night, I made myself a simple dinner. Toast, warm broth. Strength matters in moments like these. As I washed the dishes, I caught my reflection in the window. The lines on my face were deeper, but my eyes were steadier. I wasn't slipping. I was waking up. The next morning, the house felt lighter, not because the danger was gone, because I had decided to face it standing. I made oatmeal, ate half of it, and packed my bag with the forged papers, not to hide them, to use them. I walked to the bus stop again, pain in my knees, fire in my spine. At the bank, Ellen greeted me like she had been waiting. We'll finalize everything today, she said. We did dot new card, new access, new security. Every form I signed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Before I left, Ellen looked at me and said quietly, most people give up when their family pushes this hard. I smiled. Most people my age spent a lifetime being underestimated. Outside, the air was cold. Then Laura's car pulled up beside me. Window rolled down, smile thin as paper. Mary, she said, you've been running around. You should have told us. I didn't realize I needed permission to leave my home. Her smile cracked. We're trying to keep you safe. You're trying to keep me dependent. Her eyes flickered. Brian's worried sick, she said. Do you know what freezing the accounts did to us? You'll adjust, I replied. Adults do. She stared at me like I was someone she no longer recognized. This isn't over, she said. I know, I answered. She drove off, and as I watched her disappear down the street, I realized something. They thought this was a battle for control. But for me, this was something bigger. This was a battle for dignity. And I wasn't losing it again. The next morning, I didn't open the curtains. I let the house stay quiet. Not dark, just still. Some mornings don't need sunlight. They need courage. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that cooled too fast and tried to collect my thoughts. But they kept circling the same truth. If Brian and Laura had already gone this far, this wasn't panic. This was planning. They hadn't suddenly decided I was slipping. They had been preparing for this long before I noticed the cracks. Around late morning, I put on my coat and walked 3 streets over to a small legal office. The sign outside was faded, the doorbell crooked, but the man inside had a reputation for being sharper than he looked. Kent. When he saw me, he stood. Mrs. Hall Aaron, what can I do for you? I need protection, I said, from my own family. His face didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. Tell me everything. So I did, not dramatically, not in tears, just the facts. The phone shut off, the card blocked, the forged signature, the guardianship attempt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. They crossed several legal lines, he said calmly, and you still have time to stop them. I don't want to punish them, I said. I just want my life back. He nodded. Then we do this the right way. He slid a folder toward me. Independent financial advocate. Legal boundaries. Clear authority. No more gray areas for them to hide in. This ensures no one can make decisions for you without your consent, he said. Not your son, not your daughter-in-law, no one. I signed the first papers with a hand that didn't shake. For the first time in weeks, something loosened inside my chest. When I walked back home, my phone buzzed. Brian, then Laura, then a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer any of them. I was done reacting. Now I was preparing. At home, the answering machine blinked. One message, Laura's voice, tight, controlled. Mary, you're making things very complicated. If you don't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to escalate. You're not safe managing things alone. Escalate. That word wasn't care. That word was a threat. I deleted the message. Then I sat at my table and wrote everything down. Dates, times, words. Paper trails matter when people stop pretending. That evening, I turned on only one lamp in the living room and left the rest of the house in shadow. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted the quiet to feel honest. Around dinner time, a car engine pulled into the driveway. Brian's. I didn't stand. I didn't rush. I waited. The door opened. He walked in like the house still belonged to him. So it's true, he said. You hired a lawyer. I protected myself, I answered. He scoffed. From your own family. From what my family tried to do to me, I corrected. He paced the room, running a hand through his thinning hair. You're acting erratic. The bank flagged the account. You refused the assessment. You're making yourself look unstable. There it was, that word again, unstable. The label people use when control slips through their fingers. I'm acting normal, I said. You just don't recognize me when I'm not obeying. He leaned forward. We were trying to help you. Bills are due. We're drowning because of you. No, I said quietly. You're drowning because you built your life on my silence. That hit him harder than shouting ever could. He stopped pacing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said it. Laura and I are coming tomorrow with documents. You need to sign them. I looked at him calmly. No. His face hardened. You don't even know what they are. I know enough. You're being impossible. No, I said softly. I'm being myself. You just forgot who that is. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. You're going to regret this, he muttered. I met his eyes. I already regret many things. Letting you take my life isn't one of them. He left. The door slammed. I locked it. Not from fear, from clarity. That night, I slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but honestly. The next day, I didn't waste time. I went to my doctor. Not because I felt weak, because I wanted proof. A full evaluation. Cognitive, physical, everything. The doctor smiled when he finished. You're healthier than most people 10 years younger, he said, and your mind is sharp. I asked him to put it in writing. He did. That paper felt heavier than gold in my hands. Back home, I added it to my growing stack of truth. By afternoon, I heard footsteps on the porch. Dr. Setz, Brian and Laura. They walked in carrying a folder like it held power. This is a simplified agreement, Laura said. It ensures support. I opened my own folder. Not blue, not fancy, just real. I slid the medical report across the table. Before we discuss anything, read this. Brian's face drained as he skimmed it. Then I placed Mr. Kent's papers beside it. Independent advocate. Legal boundaries. Protection. Laura swallowed. What is this? My future, I said. Handled by me. For the first time, neither of them spoke. Fear sat between us, where confidence used to be. You should go, I said quietly. They didn't argue. They couldn't. When the door closed behind them, the house felt warm again. Not because the fight was over, because I had finally stopped being afraid of it. I sat at my table, folded my hands, and let the stillness settle. Preparation was done. Now came the consequences. The morning after they left, the house felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm has passed through, when you don't yet know what's broken, but you know nothing is where it used to be. I made myself breakfast and didn't taste a single bite. My mind wasn't on food. It was on what I knew was coming next. When people lose control, they don't let go. They tighten their grip. By noon, my phone started buzzing. Once, twice. 3 times. Brian. Laura. Then Cassidy. She hadn't called me in months. Now suddenly, she remembered my number. I didn't answer. Not yet. The 4th call came from an unknown number. I picked that one up. Grandma, a young voice said softly. It's me, Cassidy. I sat down slowly at the table. I'm surprised to hear from you, I said. She hesitated. Dad says you're doing something crazy, that you froze everything, and now things are falling apart. Do I sound crazy to you? I asked. There was silence on the line. No, she admitted. You sound different. Different. That was the word people use when they finally realize you stopped being manageable. Your parents have been using me for years, I said gently. You know that. She didn't argue. She just breathed into the phone, the way people do when a truth they've avoided becomes too heavy to ignore. They said you embarrassed them at the bank, she whispered. I protected myself, I replied. Embarrassment is a side effect. Her voice softened. They say they won't make it this month without help. That, I said quietly, is not my emergency. There was another pause. Grandma, she asked, are you safe? That question hit deeper than all the accusations combined. Yes, I said. I am, she whispered. I'm sorry, and hung up. I stared at the phone after the call ended, not with regret for what I'd done, but regret for how long I'd allowed myself to be small before I finally stood up. That's when I heard the car door slam outside, heavy, angry. The doorbell rang like it owed him something, Brian. I didn't rush. I didn't straighten my sweater. I didn't perform. I walked to the door and stood on the other side of it. Mom, he yelled, open the door. We need to talk. Need, his favorite word. I'm not available, I said through the wood. You can't do this to us, he shouted. You've ruined everything. No, I replied calmly. I've restored everything to its rightful owner. He rattled the handle, then went quiet. Footsteps retreated. A car engine started. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. That night, he came back. Not angry this time. Desperate. I was sitting in my armchair when I heard the lock turn. He still had a key. I made a note in my head to change that tomorrow. He walked in like a man who had finally run out of strength to pretend. You hired a lawyer, he said. I protected myself. You went to a doctor too, he added. I protected myself again. He paced once, then stopped in front of me. You've turned everything upside down, he said. Do you know how this makes us look? I looked up at him. You're worried about appearances. I was worried about losing my life. That stopped him. He sat down heavily. We were just trying to help you, he muttered. You were trying to manage me, I said. There's a difference. His shoulders dropped. The anger drained out of him, leaving something smaller behind. Something like fear. Everything's a mess, he said quietly. The bills, the transfers, the cards. We counted on your support. You counted on my silence, I corrected. He rubbed his face with both hands. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. I leaned forward. Brian, You've been leaning on me financially since your 20s. You always had a reason, a crisis, a season of bad luck. And I helped every time." He swallowed. "But somewhere along the way, I continued. You stopped seeing that help as love and started seeing it as obligation." That was the moment he broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, the way people do when the truth finally reaches them. "Do you think I'm a bad son?" he asked. I took a breath. "I think you're a man who forgot he grew up." He flinched. "Not from cruelty, from accuracy." "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "You start," I said, "by accepting you can't fix it by taking more from me." He nodded slowly, like someone who had just met a limit he didn't know existed. I stood. "This conversation is over for tonight. Go home." He rose like he was moving through deep water. At the door, he hesitated. "Will you still talk to me?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "when you speak to me as a son, not a manager." He nodded once. Then he left. When the door closed, I leaned my forehead against it for just a moment. Not from weakness, from release. The next day came without drama. No calls, no messages, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't threaten you. The kind that finally lets you breathe. I moved through my morning slowly, made breakfast, watered the plants, folded laundry I'd ignored for weeks. Small tasks, big peace. By afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with Mr. Kent's folder again. Today wasn't about defense. Today was about the future. I opened the estate papers, not out of anger, out of clarity. I filled in the name of the only person who had stood beside me without asking for anything. Lucy. Not Brian, not Laura, not Cassidy. Lucy. The one who knocked softly, the one who asked if I was safe. That decision didn't feel cruel. It felt honest. I called Mr. Kent and scheduled a signing. When I hung up, my phone buzzed. A message from Lucy. "Grandma, Dad's acting strange today. Quieter. Calmer. Did something happen?" I typed back. "We talked. Don't carry it. It's not yours." She replied instantly. "I'm proud of you." That message sat warm in my chest for the rest of the day. As the sun set, I walked through my house one more time. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. It was mine again, fully, unquestionably, and for the first time in a very long while, I wasn't preparing to survive anymore. I was preparing to live. The next morning didn't feel heavy. It felt clear. Not happy, not peaceful, just honest. The kind of morning where you don't wake up afraid of what's coming. You wake up ready to face it. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table with Mr. Kent's folder open in front of me. The papers looked simple. Clean. Quiet. But every page carried weight. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about punishment. This was about protection. For years, I had lived carefully, softly, always trying not to upset anyone, always choosing peace over truth. But peace that costs your dignity isn't peace, it's surrender. I folded the papers and placed them in my bag. Today, I would sign the final documents, the ones that made my independence official, the ones that made it clear to anyone watching that my life was not up for negotiation anymore. When I stepped outside, the air felt sharp against my cheeks, the kind of cold that wakes you up instead of slowing you down. At the lawyer's office, Mr. Kent greeted me with the same quiet respect he always did. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for years," I said. "I just didn't know it." We sat across from each other. The room was small. No ceremony, no drama. Just truth on paper. I signed every page carefully, not rushed, not shaking. Each signature felt like reclaiming something that had always belonged to me, but that I had slowly given away to keep other people comfortable. When it was done, Mr. Kent placed the final document into a folder and slid it across the desk. "It's official," he said. "No one can make financial or legal decisions for you without your consent. Not now, not later." I breathed out slowly. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe in a way that didn't depend on anyone else. On the walk home, I stopped at the grocery store. Just a small test. Bread. Apples. Tea. The card beeped. Approved. That sound shouldn't have mattered so much, but it did, because it wasn't about money. It was about control. As I stepped out of the store, I saw someone standing on my porch. Brian. Not angry this time, not demanding, just tired. The kind of tired that comes after the fight leaves you. I climbed the steps slowly. He didn't speak until I reached the door. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." Not loud, not dramatic, just the truth, finally spoken without armor. I unlocked the door and held it open. "Come in." We sat in the living room. The afternoon light stretched across the floor between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "I didn't think it would go this far." "I know," I replied. "You thought I'd let you take over like before." He nodded. "I was scared," he admitted, "of losing the house, of failing again. It felt easier to let you carry everything." I looked at him. "I carried it because I loved you, not because it was my job." His eyes dropped. "I crossed a line," he said. "More than one." "Yes," I answered. "You did." He swallowed. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" I took a long breath. "I already have," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean giving back what I took away. Those boundaries stay." He nodded slowly. "I understand." He sat there for a moment longer, then stood. "Can we start again?" he asked. I looked at him. "Not again," I said gently. "Forward." He didn't argue. When he left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt settled. That evening, I made tea and sat in my chair by the window. The light outside faded slowly. No rush. No fear. I thought about the woman I had been a month ago. Quiet, careful, afraid of upsetting anyone. And I thought about the woman sitting there now. Not loud, not bitter, just awake. For years, I had let people decide who I was. A mother first, the helper, a safety net. Never just a woman with her own life. That chapter was closed now. The next morning, I woke early without an alarm. Some days arrive with purpose. I dressed carefully, not to impress anyone, but to feel steady. The blue cardigan, clean shoes, my husband's old watch on my wrist. It didn't work anymore, but it reminded me of someone who had always trusted my judgment. Today, I would finish what I started. I walked back to Mr. Kent's office for the final step. We reviewed everything one last time. Independent advocate, legal protections, clear instructions for the future. No gray areas left. When I left the office, the wind met me head-on. It didn't push me back. It pushed me forward. On the way home, I passed the same bus stop I had stood at weeks earlier, shaking and unsure. This time, I didn't stop. I walked past it. Not because I didn't need help anymore, but because I no longer needed permission to stand on my own. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the last folder. My estate papers. Not because I was afraid of dying, because I was finally serious about living. I filled in the name that felt right. Lucy. Not out of anger, not out of punishment, out of gratitude. She had seen me when others tried to manage me. She had asked if I was safe, not if I was still useful. When the papers were complete, I placed them beside the rest of my documents. For the first time in years, everything in my life was in order. Not perfect, but honest. That evening, a message came on my phone from Lucy. Grandma, whatever you're doing, I'm proud of you. I smiled, not because I needed her approval, but because I finally believed it myself. As the sun went down, I turned off the lights one by one, not out of habit, out of peace. I wasn't young anymore. My joints still ached. My memory still had soft spots. But my voice was strong. My life was mine. And tomorrow finally belonged to me. The morning came in softly. No alarms. No urgency, just light slipping through the curtains like it had nowhere else to be. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea warming my hands and thought about how strange life is, how quickly it can change, not because the world shifts, but because you finally decide to. For weeks, everything in my life had felt like a battle. Every phone call, every knock on the door, every silence. But that morning, there was no fight left in me, only clarity. I didn't rush. I didn't plan. I simply let the day arrive. Around mid-morning, I walked through the house one last time, the way you do when you race seeing something clearly for the first time. The living room, where I'd rocked Brian to sleep when he was a baby. The hallway where my husband and I had argued about paint colors. The kitchen table, where I had signed away pieces of myself without realizing it. I touched the back of a chair and smiled, not with sadness, with gratitude, because this house had seen me through everything, and now, for the first time, it belonged to me again, not just legally, but emotionally. The phone rang, not sharply, not demanding, just a simple ring. It was Lucy. "Grandma," she said. "Dad told me he came by yesterday." "He did," I answered. "Is everything okay now?" I thought about the question. Not what she meant, but what she needed to hear. "Yes," I said. "Everything is exactly where it should be." She breathed out softly on the other end. "I'm proud of you." Those words stayed with me long after the call ended, not because I needed approval, but because I had finally earned my own. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside and sat on the porch. The air was cool, but kind. A neighbor waved. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Life continued, unaware of the quiet war I had just survived. That's when I realized something. The biggest victories in life don't come with applause. They don't make noise. They don't show up on anyone else's timeline. They happen quietly, inside a woman who finally stops shrinking. A few hours later, Brian stopped by again, not unannounced this time. He knocked softly, the way Lucy always did. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, shoulders not tense, just tired. "I won't stay long," he said. "That's okay," I replied. "You can stay as long as you need." We sat in the living room, not like enemies, not like strangers, just two people learning a new way to exist. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything I did, about how I treated you like a problem instead of my mother." I didn't interrupt. Some realizations need space to finish themselves. "I thought I was helping," he continued, "but I was really just afraid of losing my safety net." I nodded. "I was your safety net for a long time," I said, "but even nets get tired of catching the same fall." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I don't want to be that man anymore," he said quietly. I believed him, not because he said it, because this time he wasn't asking me to fix anything. He was just telling the truth. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on me, even when you stopped letting me use you." I smiled. That's what love looks like when it finally learns its boundaries. After he left, the house didn't echo. It didn't ache. It rested. That evening, I took out a clean notebook and wrote something on the first page. Not a list, not a plan, just a sentence. "I choose myself, not in anger, not in revenge, in peace." I placed the notebook in the drawer with my important papers, not because it was legal, but because it was truth. As night fell, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights turn on one by one. And I thought about all the women like me, the ones who spent their lives being useful, being needed, being everything for everyone else, until one day they realized no one had ever asked what they wanted. If you're listening to this story and something in it feels familiar, if you've ever felt silenced, managed, shrunk, let me tell you something I learned too late. So you don't have to. You don't need permission to take your life back. You don't need approval to draw a line. You don't need to be young to be powerful. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining, stop apologizing, and quietly decide, this is my life, and I will live it on my terms. That night, I turned off the lights in my house one by one, not because the day was over, because a new chapter had finally begun, not loud, not dramatic, just free.